Boss. That one word stopped everyone in the room. My father froze mid-sentence, his forced laugh turning into silence. My mother's glass nearly slipped from her hand, and my younger brother, who was always treated like a prince, looked as though someone had slapped him across the face. The man who spoke wasn't just anyone. He was the CEO they had spent months trying to impress, the very reason they made me polish the silverware till midnight, scrub the floors on my knees, and serve like a maid while they hosted their grand dinner parties. But on this night, the night they thought they would finally secure his favor, he stood, extended his hand toward me, and with respect that shook the air, he called me what they never in their lives imagined I could be. Boss. The word echoed, burning through the walls of that mansion-like house. My parents looked at me like they were staring at a stranger. Their mouths hung open, their dreams cracked right in front of their eyes. And then the CEO smiled, leaned closer, and said words that made the ground beneath them collapse. But before I tell you what he said, let me pause here. If you want to hear the rest of how this night turned my life upside down, and how I went from being treated like a slave in my own family to the one holding all the power, don't forget to like this story, watch closely, and subscribe for more. Because what you're about to hear will change the way you see family forever. My name is Emily. I grew up in a family where I was never truly seen as a daughter. To the outside world, my parents, Martin and Susan, looked like a picture-perfect couple. My dad wore tailored suits, my mom always kept a painted smile, and they loved to brag about their wonderful family. But behind closed doors, it was different. Very different. I was the oldest of three. Then there was Jacob, my younger brother, the golden child, who could do no wrong. And little Chloe, the baby everyone adored. Me? I was the one who washed Jacob's muddy shoes after football practice, who ironed Dad's shirts while Chloe played with dolls, and who cooked dinner even when I had exams the next day. To them, I wasn't family, I was their worker. And the worst part? They made me believe it was normal. Emily, take out the trash. Emily, don't argue. You're lucky we give you a roof over your head. Emily, you'll never be more than this. I swallowed those words every day, but they burned inside me. I wanted to believe I was worth more. Still, the fear of being unloved, of being nothing, kept me quiet. But the night everything changed started long before the CEO called me boss. It began with my father's obsession. He had spent years trying to win favor with a man named Richard Wallace, a powerful CEO who controlled contracts, investments, and wealth beyond imagination. To Dad, impressing Richard was like winning the lottery. He believed one dinner, one connection, could lift him into the circles of the rich and powerful. And for that, he used me. You'll serve at the dinner, Mom told me that morning, shoving a list into my hand. Make sure everything's perfect. One mistake, Emily, and you'll ruin our future. Future. Their future. Never mine. So, while they dressed in their finest, I tied an apron around my waist and worked. I marinated, I stirred, I cleaned. Every second, the weight of their voices pressed down on me. But I kept silent, because deep inside, I was hiding something they didn't know, something that would turn their perfect evening into their greatest humiliation. By the time the guests arrived, the house sparkled. My parents laughed like royalty as they welcomed Richard Wallace and his team. I stayed in the shadows, pouring wine, setting plates, being invisible. But invisibility never lasts forever. Richard's eyes landed on me once. Then again. And again. I tried to look away, but I could feel his gaze burning into me. I thought maybe I had spilled something. Maybe I looked out of place. But then his lips curved into the kind of smile that knew a secret. And when he finally stood up, interrupting my father's desperate pitch about stocks and investments, he walked right toward me. My parents' laughter died instantly. That was the moment. That was when he said it. Boss. My parents choked on their pride. My mother's hand shook so hard she spilled wine onto her dress. My brother muttered, "What?" under his breath, disbelief written all over his face. Richard didn't stop there. He leaned closer, his voice low but sharp, and said, "You've hidden long enough. Tonight, they'll know who really holds the power." My heart slammed against my chest. My parents stared, waiting for me to explain, waiting for me to deny, waiting for me to fall back into my role as their servant. But I couldn't, because the truth was bigger than all of us. And that truth? It was about to destroy everything they had ever built. At that exact second, I heard a crash in the dining room. A scream followed. Then silence. Something terrible had just happened. Something none of us could ignore. And that was where everything began to spiral. The crash echoed like thunder, shattering the carefully staged silence of the room. My mother's scream cut through the air, sharp and piercing. Everyone turned toward the dining room, where a tray of crystal glasses lay smashed across the marble floor. But it wasn't just broken glass. Jacob, my precious younger brother, the one they always protected like a crown jewel, was standing frozen, his hands trembling, his face pale. And right beside him, one of Richard Wallace's top executives lay sprawled on the floor, blood seeping from a gash on his forehead. The room erupted into chaos. "What have you done?" Mom shrieked, rushing to Jacob as if he were the victim instead of the one standing over the injured man. Dad stammered, his voice cracking. It was an accident. I swear, just an accident. But Richard Wallace wasn't looking at the blood. He wasn't even looking at Jacob. His eyes were fixed on me, calm, steady, as though he knew I had a choice to make. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. For years, I had been the invisible servant. But now, all eyes were on me. The CEO had called me boss. My parents were seconds away from ruin. And my brother, golden, perfect Jacob, was finally standing where I had stood all my life, guilty, helpless, and exposed. "Emily," Richard said slowly, his voice slicing through the noise. "What happens next is up to you." The word struck me like lightning. Up to me? No one had ever given me power before. No one had ever asked what I wanted. My heart raced, my palms shook, but for the first time, I wasn't scared. Mom grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Emily, do something. Fix this. Don't just stand there. Fix this. Like always. Like I was their maid, their cleaner, their tool." I looked at her, and I swear in that moment I saw fear for the first time in her eyes, not for me, but of me. The executives whispered among themselves. One of them pulled out a phone. Police? Ambulance? The future my parents had been building with lies and cruelty was dangling by a thread. And then it happened. The man on the floor groaned, blood dripping down his face, and he whispered one word before passing out. "Murder." The room went dead silent. Richard's jaw tightened. The executives froze. My parents' faces drained of color. And Jacob? He fell to his knees, muttering, "It wasn't me, it wasn't me." Even though everyone had seen it. I felt my heart slam in my chest. This wasn't just broken glass anymore. This was blood. This was law. This was court. And for the first time in my life, I realized something powerful. The chains that bound me to them were breaking. They needed me. My voice. My decision. My silence could protect them. My words could destroy them. Richard leaned closer. His whisper meant only for me. "This is your moment, Emily. Do you save them? Or do you let them fall?" My parents were on their knees, begging me with their eyes. Jacob was sobbing like a child. And me? I stood taller than I ever had before. I opened my mouth to speak. And then the front door burst open. 2 police officers stormed in. "Hands where we can see them." My father stumbled back. My mother screamed again. Jacob clutched at me like I could save him. And I didn't move. Because for once, I wasn't the servant. I was the storm. The blinding flash of red and blue lights poured through the windows as the police stormed in, guns drawn, commanding the room with a power my father had always craved, but never truly had. "Hands where we can see them," one officer barked, his voice firm, leaving no room for questions. Everyone froze. Everyone except Richard Wallace. The CEO calmly adjusted his cufflinks, his eyes never leaving me, like he knew this was still my story, not theirs. Jacob collapsed against the wall, shaking. "I didn't mean to. It was an accident." His voice cracked, his golden boy mask crumbling under the weight of the moment. But the officer wasn't listening to excuses. He pointed to the unconscious executive bleeding on the floor. Who's responsible for this? All eyes darted toward Jacob. And for the first time in my life, I saw my parents look at their beloved son not with pride, but with fear. My mother, trembling, stammered, "Officer, please, it was just a mistake. My son would never." "Quiet," the second officer cut her off. "This is a crime scene. I should have felt sorry. Maybe once, I would have." But as I stood there, hearing the officers question my parents, watching them beg like children, something inside me hardened. Years of scrubbing floors, swallowing insults, and crying in silence, they all boiled down to this moment. Richard leaned close again, his voice low, steady, almost like a challenge. "Emily, do you realize? With one word, you could save them or bury them. Which will it be?" My father snapped his head toward me, desperation twisting his face. "Emily, say something. You saw it. It was nothing but an accident. You have to help your family." Family. That word used to mean something to me. But what kind of family treats their daughter like a servant? What kind of family only sees you when they need saving? The officers pressed for answers. One of them looked at me directly. You were standing closest. Tell us exactly what happened here." The room went silent. My parents held their breath. Jacob sobbed into his hands. This was it. This was the moment where I could finally choose silence and loyalty, or truth and freedom. But before I could answer, the bleeding executive stirred again. His voice was weak, but his words pierced through the air like knives. He attacked me. His eyes flickered open, blood staining his lips. He lifted a trembling finger and pointed directly at Jacob. "That boy, he tried to kill me." The officers didn't hesitate. They rushed Jacob, yanking his arms behind his back, cuffing him as my mother screamed, "No, no, please, he's just a child." But Jacob wasn't a child anymore. He was 18, the same age I had been when my parents forced me into endless chores, stripping me of any childhood I could have had. Dad lunged forward, his face red with rage. "You can't take my son. Do you know who I am? I have connections. This is outrageous." The officer shoved him back. "You can explain that down at the station." As they dragged Jacob toward the door, he screamed my name. "Emily, help me, please. You're my sister." And I froze. For years, I had begged for that recognition, for him to see me as his sister, not his servant. And now he said it. But it was too late. The door slammed shut behind the officers, leaving only silence and broken pieces of my parents' perfect image scattered across the floor. Mom collapsed, sobbing, her makeup smeared. Dad sank into a chair, clutching his head, whispering curses under his breath. And me? I stood tall, my chest rising and falling, my heart pounding with something I had never felt before. Power. Richard finally spoke, his voice calm but cutting through the silence like a blade. "This is only the beginning, Emily. The world you once slaved for is crumbling. The question is, will you build your own empire from the ashes?" I stared at him, my mind racing, my heart torn. My parents were broken, Jacob was gone, and yet Richard's words burned into me. Could I? Could I take control of the very life they told me I would never have? But before I could answer him, a new sound filled the air. Sirens. More of them. Then the knock at the door. Firm. Demanding. "This is the police. We have a warrant." My parents gasped. My mother's eyes widened in terror. Dad's face drained of all color. And me? My hands shook because I realized this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. This was only the beginning of their fall. And my rise. The pounding at the door grew louder. "Police! Open up now, we have a warrant." My father staggered to his feet, his voice trembling. "Warrant? For what? We haven't done anything wrong." But deep down, he knew. They all knew. For years, my parents had hidden things, shady deals, money laundered through business trips, lies stacked on top of lies. They thought no one would ever notice because they wore their masks so well. But the masks were cracking, and tonight they shattered. Richard Wallace calmly sipped his wine as if none of this chaos concerned him. His eyes flicked to me, sharp and knowing. Emily, you wanted freedom? This is it. Don't waste it. The door burst open. Officers flooded in, papers in hand. Martin and Susan Miller, you are under arrest for fraud, tax evasion, and obstruction of justice. My mother screamed, her voice ripping through the air like glass. No, you can't take me. I have children. I have a family. The irony made me laugh inside. Children? Family? The same family she crushed under her heels while chasing appearances? Dad tried to argue, his voice cracking. This is a mistake. You can't. But the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. For the first time in my life, I saw my father powerless. And it was beautiful. Mom's knees gave out. Emily, please, tell them it's not true. You know us. You know we're good people. I looked her dead in the eyes. Good people don't treat their daughter like a slave. Her tears spilled, but I felt nothing. Years of their cruelty had burned out my sympathy. As they were dragged toward the door, Dad shouted, Emily, you'll regret this. You're nothing without us. Richard stood then, tall and commanding. He placed a steady hand on my shoulder. You're wrong, Martin. She was nothing because of you. Now, she's everything you'll never be. The officers pushed my parents out, their voices fading into the night. The house, once filled with their power, now echoed with emptiness. I stood in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on me. For the first time, I wasn't carrying dishes or scrubbing floors. I was carrying their downfall. Richard turned to me. Emily, it's time you knew the truth. I didn't call you boss to mock them. I called you that because this entire time, you've been more than they ever allowed you to be. You're the one who built the project we just signed. The one your father stole credit for. My breath caught. You knew? He nodded. I knew the moment I saw your work. And I knew you'd never get the recognition you deserved in this house. But tonight? That ends. You're coming with me, Emily. You're not a servant. You're my partner. Tears blurred my vision, but they weren't from sadness. For once, they were from relief. From victory. I stepped out of that house, the house where I had been broken, silenced, and enslaved, and into a new world where I wasn't just seen. I was respected. Behind me, the sirens carried my parents away into the night, their kingdom crumbling to ashes. Ahead of me, Richard waited, not as a savior, but as someone who recognized my worth. For years, they told me I was nothing. But now, the world called me something else. Boss. And this time I believed it.